With more than a decade of experience at the intersection of product design and research, Ned has driven innovation and scaled businesses that solve complex challenges for enterprises. After two successful exits, as a founder, Ned Dwyer launched his biggest passion project to date, Great Question, an all-in-one UX research platform designed to democratize research at scale and help enterprise teams better understand their users. As co-founder and CEO of Great Question, Ned Dwyer has led Great Question in empowering UX researchers, designers, and product teams to collaborate seamlessly.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy.
Thanks for joining us. It's great
Of
to have
course.
you.
Of course, yeah. Pumped to be here. 134 people, no pressure.
No,
No pressure. No, this is gonna be fun.
no pressure at all. So we have some questions for you. Let me pull these up real quick. Sorry, hold on. I'm just grabbing them. So we'll just kind of do a little back and forth here. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. We'll make sure to pull them in this kind of this interview format. So first question I have here is, and I'm going to make sure I have the right one. Hopefully, there's a wide spectrum of opinions on AI in UX research. Some are excited, others are skeptical, and many are still figuring it out. If the most successful UX researchers of the future are those who embrace it now, what might that look like in practice?
Cool. Great question. So yeah, I guess just as a quick recap introduction. So yeah, my name is Ned. I'm co-founder and CEO of Great Question. I come mostly from a product background, most notably as director of product at GoDaddy, who acquired my last company, and that's where we got in and understand how just busted running research is in a large organization for researchers, let alone for non-researchers. And as a non-researcher, I was so frustrated that was the bee in my bonnet that led me to go and start Great Question on a mission to democratize research at scale, which we now do for companies like Amazon, Intuit, Canva, Miro, you name it. That's sort of who we work with. And our platform is an all-in-one research tool, but effectively it combines a research CRM with so you can recruit people from your own customers or non-customers with all the research methods, so interviews, surveys, and prototype tests, and then a research repository all in one. But to come back to your question, I think it's a great question because, yeah, what does the future look like when we actually embrace UX research from an AI perspective? And ultimately, my view is it changes constantly, but the general trend is that I think we're going to end up with a lot more UX researchers and a lot more research operations people in this future world where we're leveraging AI. And the reason is that it's empowering non-researchers like myself to put together incredible research plans to a much higher standard than they ever could before, to leverage AI tools to go and moderate research again that they could never do the volumes before. And then to analyze and synthesize what we're learning on the back end to a high standard. But it's helping to ensure that is done to a high standard. It can rate, provide feedback on that, give it a score. But ultimately, the way that I view that is, look, if a product manager can go and produce this incredible conjoint analysis outcome to figure out pricing and packaging, imagine what a UX researcher could do, what a dedicated person that's just in that function. And I think ultimately it's this exposure to research and what you can learn from it that is ultimately going to elevate the whole industry. I love this quote from Dylan Field at Figma, and redirect me from getting off track, but I love this quote from Dylan Field at Figma, who talks about Figma's role in democratizing design. And to give you, they've just put out their S1, and I think it's like 20% of all users are actually designers. The rest are all marketers, product managers, engineers, all these other roles in the world. And the quote from Dylan Field is, "We want to lower the floor on who can go and do design, like make it easy for anyone to get in to be able to do design, while raising the ceiling on what's possible for everyone." And so I think it's the same sort of thing in every category, in engineering, in design, and in our case, in research, is make it possible for the non-researcher to get started with something, but then make it much more powerful for the strategic, experienced professional UX researchers to do the work that they do.
Well, that's really, I love what you said about it raising the ceiling for everyone, but also raising the floor. Um, that's really exciting. My next question is, how is AI relating to research democratization and lowering the barrier to conducting good research? How do researchers gain confidence in AI's ability to help them conduct good research?
Uh, I'll come back to the confidence question. I think let's put a pin in that one. I think the way that I view it, I'll give you let me tell you a story about how I imagine this future world, which is actually not too far in the future. There's some foreshadowing here for Great Question product. Um, Imagine a world where your product manager can come to you. Traditionally, they would come to you and they'd say, "Hey, look, I'm trying to understand this about our customer. Can you help me?" Right? You're busy doing all your other things, but you try to help them. And so first, you probably do a literature review. What do we already know about this customer? But in this world, the product manager can come to your system and type in, "Hey, what do we know about pricing and packaging for enterprise customers?" And it will come back. And first, I mean, the best kind of research is no research. So the first thing it comes back with is, here's what we already know about this topic, because maybe this question's already been answered before in the dozens of research studies you've done it before, or in any of the qualitative data that exists across your research repository or your support ticketing or your sales calls, or maybe even out there in the wild from social media mentions and Reddit and places like this. So the first thing we do is we get back, here's what we already know.
Hmm.
Now, and here's the major themes, here's where that data is if you want to go and view the first party data. Would you like to go and synthesize this, or would you're still dead set on going actually, running some research? And you're a product manager, so you can't help yourself. So you're like, look, I really want to talk to some customers. And so you say, look, just help me talk to customers. And so then the agent effectively acts as a what a researcher would do and ask you, well, before you do, what decision are you ultimately trying to answer here? And like, how does this relate to our organization's big, hairy, audacious goals? And those sort of standard, like 5 to 10 questions that you're asking everyone that comes in as part of your intake form to make sure that this is actually something even worth doing. Again, the best research is no research. Maybe this is actually something that you can answer on your own. You're trying to change a button color. Do we really need to talk to 100, 100 customers to go and answer this question? And so through that, you're effectively building a research plan. Like, here's what we already know. Here's what the synthesizers already know. Now, here's what I'm trying to answer. Here's the impact it's going to have on the organization. And from there, the agent can actually recommend the type of research to run. Can recommend a methodology. They can recommend an interview guide. Incentive amount. An audience sample size. Even who the specific customers are to go and talk to. And so now it's in a place where someone could actually go and run this research if possible. But again, you as the researcher are still in this fold. And so you can decide, well, actually, I need to approve that, because there may be a time when you decide this is above your pay grade. And so if we are going to go and do this, we're going to be the ones that go and run this. Or we authorize that person to go and run that research and they're off to the races. Now they can decide if they want to go and run it themselves, or they can go and use AI to go and moderate it. But the research is then run. And the powerful thing happens on the back end. One, we're able to score the output of the research by identifying whether they're asking leading questions, whether they followed the interview guide, whether they actually learned something insightful from this, and then producing an insight report. Again, we can go and rate that. But then how we distribute that to everyone in the organization, because ultimately that's where the research will have impact. And all the AI tooling around research repositories, and not only in synthesis, but also identifying the people in the organization that care about these topics is what makes it really powerful. So there's some sense of how we get there. Now, I think there is a big question in confidence, like how do you get confident in these tooling? And I think that's kind of great. Someone's already mentioned synthetic users. Great. Let's like touch the third rail,
Yeah.
democratization, synthetic users, AI moderation, like keep the questions coming. Um, so I think that the question of confidence, I think, comes down to um, one, I think it's the kind of things that there are a broad range of people out there when it comes to using AI from a research perspective. There are people that are the hardcore evangelists. AI
Mhm.
can do no wrong. AI is my Lord and Savior. Like it is coming and it is the best thing since sliced bread. And they will hear no one talking any bad about it, right? And I think that's probably about 10% of the population. On the other side, we've got the people that are very much against AI. AI is unethical. We should stop it. There needs to be a moratorium on it. We should regulate it to death. And if you do it, you're a bad person. But I think the reality is that most of us, and maybe we can do a poll at some point, but most of us, I think, sort of sit in the middle, right? We're like unsure, maybe a little bit skeptical, healthy skepticism, generally optimistic, curious, and that's probably why, there's 162 odd people in the room now. Um, and I think the confidence ultimately comes from leaning into it is one, having an open mind and saying like synthetic users sounds like a really bad idea, but how might it be useful? And how could I use it? And when would be a time when that would actually be helpful? Um, so if you're not open-minded, you're going to say synthetic users are bad. They can never be good. And I think that is just too black and white for the realities of the world. The second is to go and try as many of these tools as possible. And I think this is imperative if you want to stay anywhere relevant in this new world where AI is here. It is not going away. AI usage and adoption is increasing at a rate of knots. And so how are you going to leverage it? And I think that's trying a broad range of tools, trying ChatGPT, but also trying Claude, seeing what different ones are good for, seeing how they update. On a month-by-month basis, we're seeing more and more developments on AI that's making it more and more progressive. And so using it, being knowledgeable about it, and then I think bringing that back and sharing that with your organization. And I think what that's going to do is one, it is going to make it is sort of it's a future-proofing your career in many ways, right? Two, just generally teaching something that you've been learning is good to go and solidify the concepts and make sure you really understand it and it makes sense. But it can also help massively improve your workflows in your organization to speed things up to make you more efficient so that you can do more in less time and have more time to go and spend on strategic research outcomes. That ultimately, in my mind, is how you're going to build up the confidence about it. I see on LinkedIn that cesspit that it actually is people being so much against so many of the AI things, and there's flame threads where people are like, you can't trust AI. It will give you it'll generate an insight, but it won't tell you where it got the data from. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you've been able to reference the data that it's been doing for in our platform for 18 months now. The citations are really high quality. And we've, not saying it's completely hallucination proof, but by and large it is. And so, how does this actually compare, this technology actually compare to another tool that we're all really skeptical about, which is Wikipedia, right? I remember in high school, dating myself, Wikipedia came out, and they were like, do not cite Wikipedia as a reference in your essay that you're writing. Because people could lie and they can edit it and it's sometimes incorrect. And all those things are still true today, right? Largely you can trust it, but there's still things that people can manipulate around it. But now I think we've come to learn that generally speaking, it's an overwhelming force for good. And when you can go and look at those first party references, which are references, you can then help you make a more informed decision about whatever decision you're at. But look, if you're trying to decide whether or not you should go and invest all your money into Bitcoin, maybe don't rely on Wikipedia or ChatGPT to go and help you make that decision. But if you're trying to decide what's the population of Guatemala, what actually is the impact of this. And in many ways, I think that this is and I do have a couple of slides here, so I might bring these up and I'll share them periodically. But many times this is I think this is a Jeanette Facella piece, who I think is a guild member. Right? It's very similar to when should we run research decision? Do we have really clear understanding of the problem, or are we sort of pretty naive about it? And how about the risk? Is it a high risk or is it low risk? Look, if we've got pretty high understanding of the problem and it's a pretty low risk initiative, we probably are fine to go and use ChatGPT or any of these sort of models, like foundational models or AI and things like that. Again, with some healthy dose of skepticism. But where we're in a situation where the risk is really high, like we're going to put our life savings into Bitcoin, and the problem clarity is really low, I don't know how Bitcoin works, then maybe we want to spend a bit more time and step away from the machine and go and talk to some real life humans and go and get some advice. Um, anyway, I know you all like to get into tactical stuff, so happy to shift gears, but that's some of the ways I'm thinking about it. Is that helpful?
It is, and I love a 2 by 2, and this is really helpful, and I actually, I use something very similar to this when thinking about, when to democratize research, when do we
Yes.
allow for friends of research to kind of participate, and when is it something that, hey, this is, a study that might need a specialist or someone who has a lot of experience because it's a very complex, nuanced problem. So it seems like there's maybe some parallel here when to leverage AI and when to bring in others and automate.
So many parallels. So many parallels.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is and I think there's some things that you'd said that really resonate with me personally. I remember when I was running some research teams, we had a very similar process. And a lot of it is sometimes you don't always need to run new studies. Sometimes there's a lot of great information that just needs to kind of get to the right people. And what a great way to leverage a tool and really get your hands dirty. And there was something that I think I'm trying to remember who said it, but research AI, a lot of people are worried about AI potentially taking their jobs, being replaced by robots and AI. I personally tend to think that it's not that it will take away jobs from researchers, but it will potentially take away jobs from those who don't know how to leverage this new tool or really put themselves into that future mindset.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think it's actually really interesting to look at engineering. Well, let's look at a couple of different professions, right? Let's look at copywriters. I think it's a really challenging time to be a copywriter right now. I've got a lot of friends who are copywriters. I'm a huge fan of copywriting in general because it's so easy to go and produce the written word using these large language models. That's really what they're for, the language piece. And so it's tough if you're a copywriter, but the copywriters that I know are actually have never had more work in their lives because while they can produce a ton of words, when you're trying to get that right combination of words that's really specific, it's like you're a surgeon. It's very scalpel-like for those specific use cases. And but not for everything, right? And so the volume of high quality copy in the world, I would hope would be lifted. I've seen some terrible websites, terrible copy in the world that can't afford copywriters. And you could perhaps say, well, if they can't afford it, they shouldn't be writing copy, writing anything on the internet, which I think is not a reasonable line of talking. But let's look at it. And so long term, I would not like to be a copywriter. I would be trying to figure out how I can get more specialized in my skill set in this world where AI can go and generate a lot of things, such as how can I help people write style guidelines and incorporate into AI, or maybe completely leave the category. But let's look at engineers as the other end, right? These foundational models are incredible at producing high quality code. Between 40 and 70% of code in many large organizations who have adopted AI is being written today by agents of some sort, whether people are using things like Cursor or Windsurf or Claude Code or whatever it is. A great question. It's probably more like the 40 to 50%. But we have AI to go and produce things like our code, code tests, write pull reviews, review pull reviews, um, all sorts of use cases around code. And an engineer, you're like at some point, and I can go and spin up a whole app, which I will do a demo of in a minute. I can go and spin up a whole app using AI in a few minutes to a pretty high standard. Am I going to go and launch that app into production and put all my passwords and things into it? Look, probably not. But maybe in a few years' time, then I could totally see that happening because it's all evolving so much. Now, are engineers freaking out and being like, I'm going to be out of a job? Look, I'm sure there are some, but for the most part, it's allowing them it's lowered the floor for who can actually go and do engineering. I can now go and build an app as a product manager, not an engineer. But as an engineer, your job has never been more safe because you need to go and figure out how to make this secure. You need to think about the architecture of your entire application, how these complex systems work together. What is the right way to structure it? And today, the AI has a relatively short attention span. If you're trying to give it a task which takes many hours or days, it needs to chunk it down. It can't work that way. Maybe someday it will. But that's kind of what the power of the really smart engineers is that can lean in there. And so I think it's somewhat similar from a research perspective. Is look, if you're doing fairly tactical, fairly straightforward research, you're doing net promoter score, trying to understand net promoter score. That's again more third rails. Let's keep touching the third rails. But let's say you're trying to do like closed loss analysis or something like that. It's fairly straightforward. It's fairly tactical. You're going to be doing a large volume of it. Is your time best spent doing that, or is your time best spent setting up the systems to allow those answers to be populated to the organization in the right way, so that you can instead focus on doing the research that comes out of that closed loss analysis, such as, oh, pricing is a problem. Let me go and rip apart pricing. What a fantastic problem for an experienced researcher that you could trust to an AI. But again, problem clarity low, risk pretty high. I would want to go and employ a researcher to go and do that kind of work.
Absolutely. And I know there's a few questions coming into the chat. I have a couple questions here, and then we'll go to the ones in the chat if that's all right. Um, Looking ahead 12 to 18 months, what additional changes can we expect on the way UX research is done day to day? Where do you expect AI to catch on with UX researchers, and why?
I mean, I I think it's everything. Like I think on a day-to-day basis, it is going to do you're going to leverage it to go and search across large volumes of data to quickly summarize them to get to your insights faster and empower other members of your team. You're going to use it to manage intake forms and use it for democratization research in general, such as intake forms, actually doing all the data governance around the research that's being run, and then the synthesis. You're going to be using it to rating the outputs of that research. You're going to be using it for your own. I think researchers more and more are leveraging AI to go and moderate research for them, to allow them to do more research in less time effectively, and all the synthesis side of things. I'm just listing really the different parts of. I could talk about the 8 pillars of research ops if we want to, or I could talk about all the research methodologies, but I really can't see an area that isn't touched by research by AI. Now, is there still a role for the human in that mix? Absolutely. Again, if it's high risk and low problem clarity, absolutely. If we're talking about running research with internal stakeholders, absolutely. We're talking about just high, yeah. Again, there's still a role there, but I can't see an area it's not touching.
Yeah, and I found that sometimes with an AI may not be able to align stakeholders, make sure that everyone's
Mhm.
got the right goals and objectives. So I think there's some things that being a good researcher, knowing what the organization needs, you're always going to need someone to kind of orchestrate all these different tools, because an
Yes.
AI is not going to be able to build those relationships and really kind of read between the lines with what a VP may need or a CEO, right?
100%. I think that orchestration layer, that's exactly where the power is. And then you're kind of orchestrating the chaos, right? The AI agents are going to go and produce all kinds of answers and results. You need to be able to take a critical eye to that and say, is this actually the right output? Is this actually answering the right question? Does it have the right data that's bringing in there? Have we run the right methodology? And the CEO, sure, could come to a tool of some sort and spin up their own research or do their own synthesis, maybe. But and they probably will. They likely already are. But when they again need to have very high confidence in this decision and really want to get below and make sure that it's right, they need a human in the mix to help them to do that analysis and help do that verification. 100%.
And how are you using AI in your own work?
So many things. So many things. So we how do we use it? So we use it for legal things. So we get NDAs from clients and vendors all the time. We need to sign. We review those to get a first pass, legal contracts, things like that. It's still a first pass. Again, much like research, I still send it to the expert. It goes through our lawyer eventually, but it allows me to go and say, here are the hot button items that are addressed in here, that I've identified. Here's my opinion on them. Now, can you please go and vet it and go and it reduces the amount of time they need to go and spend on this. I use a lot for communication. So I'll write product requirements docs, or I'll write job descriptions. I'll turn on ChatGPT. I'll go for a walk around the block. It's exactly 10 minutes, which is exactly how much time that ChatGPT can talk to. I will then put it up into there and what I'm looking for in the role, what I'm not looking for in the role. It's got my hiring guide template, so it knows how to write a hiring guide and our job description template. And then I'll say to it, what are the questions that you would want me to answer to produce a better quality version of this PRD or job description or whatever it is? It will then ask me those questions. I'll then answer those questions. And it's the sort of thing that would take you, half a day or a day and a bunch of back and forth. And suddenly I've got a really high quality output. I'm not just publishing it. I'm almost never purely publish something I go and produce out of one of these systems. It always requires a human eye and some editing and crafting. Um, but it breaks the back of that work. We use it for prototyping all the time. If we've got some concept I'm trying to get across, I've written a PRD, and now I'm trying to like communicate, look, this is how I actually think it'll work or function. That's been really great. And just build lots of mini tools. And so we built a research incentive calculator and sample size calculator. I'll show you that in a second. I'll show you how we built that. In fact, everyone here should build one if you haven't already. I built an app to give feedback to people on their emails they're sending to me or whatever for feedback internally. They're like, "Hey, I need you to do this thing." I'm like, "Okay, hey, look, I need more context on it. What's the actual decision you make? What's gone into this?" It's like I just put that through GPT now, and it gives them a rating, and I can now take that feedback and send it to them, and it saves me a lot of time. In fact, I've now just send them a link to this GPT, and they go and can self-service that, so that when I'm getting the communications from them, we know that it's already of a high standard. Um, Tons of other ways, but there's some examples.
Wow. So it sounds like you're really using it to kind of level up your work. You're becoming this, instead of a copywriter, to use your earlier example, you're sort of an editor and a curator and a
And an
orchestrator.
orchestrator,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And so I think the way that I think about it is, look, I can now write a high quality product requirements doc and produce a prototype of what we're going to go and execute on next. I can then get that in front of customers and get their feedback on it. All of that can happen in a morning. By Monday morning at midday, I can have gotten some idea to that stage. Now, that doesn't mean, and normally that would take, a week, maybe 2 weeks. That doesn't mean I then go and take the rest of the week off. Like that's an insane concept, right? It's like, cool, I can now do in a fraction of the time. And what it means is I now can work on other higher priority things, or I can go and produce increasing the standard of this thing to a much higher level, or I can continue to get more and more customer feedback on it. And I think that's kind of the nature of, for better or worse, the nature of capitalism is I don't think there's a world where suddenly we stop building features because engineers could 10x their productivity. And so we built this year's roadmap in Q1 and we're done. It's like, no, we get back to work and we continue doing more and more and more. Yeah, that's how you do it to a higher standard.
So sort of removing some of that cognitive load and kind of
Yes.
really you're spending more time doing that critical thinking that humans or that we can do best.
Yes, and spending time with customers. I think there's something powerful about leveraging AI and all this tooling to go and run research, but there's nothing beats in person with someone, seeing their pain, seeing what they're working through. They will tell you things that you otherwise wouldn't get out over a beer at the pub on a Friday night or whatever. Then you're going to get through other methods. Yeah,
Absolutely. Human connection. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we have some questions from the chat. So I'm going to start to see here. Hold on. Do you think there will be specific niches within the field of UXR in the future of AI? I keep envisioning what the field will look like when AGI becomes a reality. For example, I've seen some blog posts and papers about much more of a need for research into AI human interaction, specifically
Mm,
focusing on things like trust and ethics. How do
mm.
we do research to learn more about how our customers feel about engaging with our AI first products and features?
Yeah, I think this is a big one. I think if I were going to pick as a researcher, if I was going to pick one area, that would probably be my top one in my top three is like understanding AI human interactions. Nielsen Norman Group put out a fantastic study. Someone could perhaps link to it in the chat recently, where they went and analyzed some of the FANG companies' AI interactions, and there's some funky things there. And some of it, I think, is as a result of this just being such a relatively new category of building things. Like we've had conversational agents around for a long time, but but there's whole new ways to go and build these interfaces, and it's not going to be all chat based. Um, but how do we go and service that to the user? How do we do the evals attached to it, evaluations attached to it, so that we know that the quality of the output is high, especially as models change frequently, that it continues to be high. All of this is the like such a sweet spot, I think, for the skill set of a UX researcher. Um, and so I think framing yourself, rebranding yourself from a UX researcher, which is very broad, right, to something that's a bit more narrow, like around AI human interaction would be, or HCI, however you want to think about it, would be really powerful. Another one in my top three, and I'm not a researcher. We employ researchers, we build software for researchers, but please take everything I say with a grain of salt from that lens. But I would. The other I would be thinking about is growth research. And so for us, we do a ton of research around everything to do with growth, getting close to marketing and sales, getting close to revenue ultimately is going to make you ultimately indispensable to the organization. So leveraging for us things like close loss analysis research, pricing analysis research, anything that's going to ultimately have a significant material impact on a business's revenue. You will never be you'll never be want for want of work.
Mm.
Uh, and if I was going to give you a third, if I had to pick a top three, and this isn't actually a list, this is just here we go. It's not an ordered list, but let's say it's top three. Um, I would say product management. Some of the best researchers I know have become product managers. As a former product manager, I have a relatively dim view of the profession. I think there's a lot more rigor that has come from folks that have come from a traditional UXR background. Incredible customer empathy, huge tool set in general, and the industry is passionate, is hungry for that, is hungry for that. Yeah, if there's a third, that would be it. I don't know if we need to start Raymond, if we need to start up the product managers guild, maybe that will come next. I don't want to put you out of work.
We'll put that on our list
All
of new
right.
guilds and startup. What's your take on using AI to conduct synthetic user research, where you essentially conduct mock interviews with AI users that are created from the information and the data that you have in your repository?
So I think there's a lot of FUD going on around synthetic users. FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt. Dust is being kicked up that these are, I saw someone describe it as unethical and you mustn't care about your users if you're doing this. And this is capitalism gone wild. And I think that's so overwrought and outrageous and ridiculous. And that there is no use case for this. None, not one. I'm like, oh, how can you be so unequivocal about this stuff? Like that drives me crazy. Um, my I too was skeptical up until maybe about I don't know, would have been about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when I met someone from a very large bank that you're probably all customers of, or almost all of you, probably 80% of you, and they were using synthetic users, and I was like, why and how are you using synthetic users? You're the first person I've met that's actually using them, and they said, well, we're trying to run research with high net worth individuals. And those people are really hard to recruit for because they've got more money than God. And what research incentive could you possibly give them that's going to make them want to go and participate in this research, let alone frequently or do a diary study or something like that? Like this gets really challenging to go and to run research with this audience. You can think of similar analogies to other hard to find audiences, accessibility audiences. There's all sorts of audiences that are really challenging to go and find. And so, look, we do this research, but it's very laborious to go and do the recruitment, run the sessions. We do it. But now we're trying to build a customized product for the another market. Let's call it, say, the Australian market. Well, trying to do it then, the similar sort of research there is all equally as difficult. And actually, there are a lot of similarities between the Australian audience and the North American audience. The regulatory environment is different. So the products we go and launch are going to be different. And so there are some challenges there, but we can leverage this synthetic data we're going to use for these sorts of decisions. Again, I come back to the this here. Look, maybe you don't want to run synthetic user research where you're in this high risk, low problem clarity area. But if it's look relatively low, you really understand the problem and relatively low risk, or maybe you're sort of skirting on these things, then I think there can be a place for it. And these tools are getting all better all the time. Again, it comes back to an early point I made, which is like it's fine to have some skepticism, and healthy skepticism I think is important in this category because there is a lot of snake oil and there's all sorts of stuff that's going on, and there's risk and there's so much unknown about it. But I think to make blanket statements of like synthetic users that are evil, and you should never, there's no use case for it is like, well, whose advantage is that to have that mindset going into this thing when actually this is just one other tool in your toolkit that can be used at certain times. So that's my perspective on it.
Right. So approaching it with some curiosity versus just kind of making a making a decision based off of some fear or uncertainty that might be bubbling up.
Exactly.
Mind.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting point with synthetic users, especially with hard to reach users. I've had that same challenge. And think a lot of it is there's this fear of people, researchers just being replaced. And if there is no need for going out and researching users, I tend to think that there could be a great use case with synthetic users as a way to help, um, sort of scale those insights, get those insights into different people's hands in a more conversational way. And as long as that data that user is being derived from is kept up to date and has been done by
Yes.
researchers, I think that it's not like it's coming from the internet and you're taking stereotypes and coming to conclusions about users based off of non-primary research or not validated research, right?
I think that's a great point. At the end of the day, you can't build synthetic users from anything but real interactions with customers and users. And then you have to keep it up to date because the world changes so dramatically. And so, again, that needs to be refreshed from actual real conversations with the users. But there are moments in time when you need to rely on this because you have no other alternative to go and get to these answers for a variety of reasons. Yeah, absolutely.
I have another question here. This one's from Sierra Patterson. What, from your perspective, will be the factors that will increase the value of engaging with UX researchers over POs? For example, to execute on research. I'm hearing a lot about tactical versus strategic research, which is great, but some business and product partners struggle to identify the need for strategic work, particularly when we begin discussing moderated and foundational work.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily have a tight list of factors here. I'd need to do more thinking about that will increase the value of engaging with UXRs over product owners. I think the analogy that I like to give here is that it's not really an analogy, but I think every day there's a million questions that your organization needs to go and ask because there's decisions that need to be made, right? They're like, do we make this button blue or red? Maybe that's a decision, but they're like, okay, are we solving for this particular use case or this job to be done or this job to be done? We need to go and make this decision on there. And then even in that scenario, like, should the interface look like this or look like that? There's million decisions people need to ask and answer. And there's only so many researchers in the organization, and they're vastly outweighed by the number of engineers, designers, marketers, everyone else. And ultimately, they're vastly overweighed by the number of decisions that your organization needs to be made on a weekly or daily basis. And so, just from a sheer like power of numbers perspective, um, they cannot possibly answer all those questions. And so, at some point, we need to figure out what decisions are we going to allow other people to go and make, or empower them to go and make, rather than allow them, because they're making the decision whether you allow them to or not. Um, and so, in that world, I think it really comes down to deeply understanding the organization's priorities, their challenges, and the roadmap to try to engage more in the strategic research so that you can get in front of as many of these decisions as possible while still empowering everyone to be able to run this tactical day-to-day research. And I think that does two things. One, we already knew we needed to do this strategic research anyway, right? That's the status quo. That's how we all operate now. But like staying really close to it. But the second part about empowerment, one, it's going to help you understand what questions people are asking on a regular basis that maybe could be informed by more foundational research. It may indicate more foundational research is needed, finding common areas of interest that you can go and bring together. But the third is that you're no longer seen, or maybe not no longer, but you're not seen as a gatekeeper and or a blocker you're seen as someone that is there to empower them and help them make better decisions and inform them versus someone that's constantly saying no, stop. And this is kind of the genesis of Great Question was we joined GoDaddy, and day one, I was asked, "What's your product strategy?" And they were like, "I was like, I don't know. Like, who are your customers? What's their customer problem that we can integrate our technology with?" And they said, "I'll go and talk to the UXR team." And they have a fantastic UX research team, really well resourced. I think there were 40 people there at the time, and all great people, very smart. But they were like, "This product you're working on is not of strategic importance to us. And so, like, we can't do this for you. We can't do this research for you. You'll have to do it yourself." I'm like, "Okay, that's okay. Well, can you tell me what we already know about our customers, this particular customer segment I was working on?" They're like, they didn't have any great answers. There was no research repository. I was like, "Well, can I use your tool to go and run research?" They're like, "It's too expensive and we've only got limited seats and I can't give you access to it." I'm like, "Okay, well, how do I talk to customers?" They're like, "We don't have a CRM. You go and talk to the customer support organization." So there was a lot of like, I can't really help you go. And all that I really wanted was I just wanted someone to look over my shoulders and give me a guidance and advice, tell me stop asking leading questions, like all these kinds of things that I was doing as a, early researcher slash product manager. Um, but there wasn't an ability to do that. And so how to flip the script on that and actually turn into more of a place of empowerment would be that. So I haven't really answered your question, Sierra, but hopefully some of that was helpful.
Great. Another question we have here: how are participants going to respond to AI moderators? So much of our job relies on building rapport to gain trust,
Mm.
to uncover the unknowns. But will participants be put off or distrust AI moderators? Not only can this result in business decisions based on incomplete and potentially misleading data, but what does that do for the reputation of research and researchers? How does that impact the quality of future participants?
Yeah, I think there's lots of really big questions in here. I think that first of all, it's worth noting that when we talk about AI moderation, I think it sounds really scary. You're like a robot is gonna talk to my customers and like what are they going to talk about and what are they going to get back and is a person going to trust this? But I think the current status quo in AI moderation tools is all that they really are is it's a survey that you can talk to instead of typing to, and it can talk back to you, and it can ask a follow-up question. And so, you go and put in there some of this technology already kind of exists, right? In that you put in a net
Mhm.
promoter score, you put in a 7 or an 8, right? And maybe comes back and asks you, if you put in a 9, it will come back and say, "Would you leave a review on our app store?" Right? That's a common trick. If you give it a 7, it might say, "Well, what can we do to do better next time?" Right? It's asking a follow-up. Now, the AI moderation, the great thing about it is that you can press a button and suddenly be talking to it and it can talk back to you. So that means you can actually fill in a survey while you're on the go. We can do it while you're washing the dishes, while you're doing something else, and that's really powerful. On average, the research has shown, it's still pretty early, on average, the verbosity, the increase in word count, effectively, that you'll get out of an AI moderated survey interview versus a regular text written survey, you get 125% increase in word count as a result. And I think it's about 100%, it's doubling in like themes introduced through this. It's not just like you're just blabbering on. It's like, no, actually, there's emergent themes that come out of this because we're able to ask follow-up questions and you're much more comfortable talking to it. So I think that's really powerful. Now, the question about like when should we use this and when should we not use this? And like, what about the role of the researcher to go and build rapport? Well, I'll start with the rapport question because that was one of my questions. And I think there's some early indications, and I say indications because I don't have a research paper I can go and point to, but from what I'm seeing, that people are actually pretty comfortable going and talking to these agents versus necessarily talking to a person because they don't feel like they're going to hurt someone's feelings or anything like that. And that's partly, a bunch of other things around there. I'm not a researcher, don't come for me. I'm sure there's far more technical ways to think about that. But then when can it be used? Like when should it be used? Well, let's come back to this high net worth individuals use case from a very large financial services institution. Well, one, those people are really hard and expensive to recruit. So we should probably have a human on there to go and respect that person's time and to be allowed us to go really deep into it because there are only so many shots on goal we're going to get for this enormous budget we're going to have to go and spend to get those people on board. The other way to think about it, though, is these people are really hard to find and their calendars are absolutely demolished. And so, one way we can go and seek to extract insights from these people or run research with them is having an AI agent that they can go and do it at 1 in the morning, or they can do it in this 10-minute gap that they've got between, when they get off the plane and their taxi shows up or whatever that is. And so I don't know where this is going to land, but I'm really excited about the possibility of AI moderation from both those lenses.
Yeah, absolutely. I've played around with some of these tools, and there's also it's I find that it's helpful with doing global research, or you can do conduct research in different languages.
Yes.
Oftentimes, it can be very expensive to send a researcher overseas, get a translator. So oftentimes, you can have someone conduct a study in their own native tongue, or at the in the time zone that best suits them. So I think there's some really handy benefits to it, but I think you're right. It's not a one size fits all. Like this might be a tool that can really help with making a survey type of study more effective and scaling that, but it may not always work for every study and every situation.
Yeah,
So especially
absolutely.
if you need that human touch, or maybe some more observational, like if you're doing an ethnography, that might be
Yes.
challenging, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Gosh, we have so
So
many
many
questions
questions. My God,
here.
21 new comments since
Um, do you I want to understand, what AI tools would you recommend that are essential or beneficial for a researcher to know? Do you have any out there? Maybe it's a chance to talk a little bit about Great Question.
Yeah. So yeah, there's tons of questions in here, so apologies if we're not going to get to them all, but I'm happy to also take some of these offline and we can maybe reply back via email. So let me share a couple of things and redirect me if you like. A couple of really quick things. One, I just want to talk about the how quick all this stuff is progressing. So I don't know if y'all have seen this. This is the Will Smith eating spaghetti, which is one of the benchmark tools to understand the progression of AI video technology. This is 2023, what it looked like. It looks like an absolute maniac. He's got way too many fingers. It's all sort of blending together. It's such a mess. And then we fast forward to what it looked like in 2024. And it's so much better. And look, he's got this regular number of fingers. He's doing a bunch of stuff that's pretty powerful. But then if we fast forward to what it looks like this year using Google's VO product, this actually looks like something almost cinematic in quality. Now, some of it said he's not running around and moving around like a maniac like the other ones were, but like you can see how, the burger interacts with his mouth. He's got some food in his mouth. He's got the right number of fingers. Just the quality of the video and the audio is actually pretty great. That's how fast it's progressed, and it's getting better and better by the day. Also point out that not all models are created equal. On the left was our mascot. A great question is a fennec fox. We made some playing cards for our recent card sorting launch, and this was the output of ChatGPT's 4.0 model. Went and did the same thing in Claude, and this is what the quality of output was from the exact same prompt. I thought it was doing a great job, but just absolutely was not. And so some models are good for different things. Now, Claude is getting better and it's fantastic for code, and some of the visual video stuff is getting better. But if you're not exploring new things here, you're not going to go and find these technologies. In terms of, I'm going to show up a quick example of Great Question, one of the use cases that I use in Great Question for all the time. And then I'm going to come back and create a quick app in V0 to show you just how quick and easy this stuff is. So this is it's a great question. Again, is we help you to recruit your own people, recruit the right people, run the research, and then synthesize the results to share with your team. And so this is like a general study I've got set up. It's all about expense management, and I can see the plan that people have created, and we've got some screeners have written in here, and then I can go and see who's actually recruited and who participated and where they're at in various stages of the funnel. I can go and find out more about this individual. That's all cool. And then in the day, we then have some results. What do we actually learn from this study? And so here I can see past interviews that were run or highlights or highlight reels. And it's really easy for me to come and, play back that session to see if this is the one I was looking for and see the transcript. And this is like a slightly squishy view, but I can go and watch it in full screen if I wanted to. And it's doing some cool stuff. Actually, I'll show you that briefly, including doing cool stuff such as like, um, you know, chapterizing the interview so I can find the right moment, creating key points, major themes, and then on the right I've got my transcript. I can code it up myself, or AI can code it up for me, suggesting tags and doing all sorts of fun stuff. But the cool thing is we went and ran a study last year on AI moderation, sorry, on prototype testing. And we had an interview guide that I thought was pretty good, asking people, how they find current tooling, what gaps exist, what gets in the way of them running more research, what would they like to see in the category. But one question that wasn't in that interview guide was, how should we price this? Or how do you currently think about the commercial and pricing? But it did come up, and people kept bringing it up as like, oh, this is actually one of the things that's getting in the way of us running more research is the pricing of the current tooling. And so I was able to come and leverage AI to go and ask this question, just not knowing whether there was anything in there, and say, hey, what do people say about pricing? And it came back and actually gave me this customer complained about this about pricing. This is how much they're paying. And actually helped me understand a whole heap of questions that then led to more questions around how we should price this thing that ultimately led to how we price it today. But in this study, this is about expense management. I can say, yeah, what were the biggest pain points in this study? And it's going to come back and not only give me an answer, it's going to summarize it into the key themes. It's then going to tell me who actually said that or experienced that. And where there is a quote, because it doesn't always give you a quote, I can go and play that quote back so I can verify that it's not hallucinating and use that to go and create a highlight reel I can go and share with my team. Um, and so here, just give it a second, it's going to load up. And so categorization and manual data entry sucks. We all know this. They use some sort of SAP type monstrosity with like lots of form-based stuff. And it's gonna, it's told me that Mark has said this, but now I've actually got this. I can verify that that is true. I can then go and add that to a highlight reel. Now, is AI synthesis the be all and end all in the current status of it? No. I still think there's a role of AI researcher. Again, with really high value research, it's going to be important. But can it at least help you do things like, I'm sure a customer mentioned something about this or that topic or whatever, will give you a quick pass of it? Absolutely. Do things like chapterization? Absolutely. And it's only getting more and more powerful day by day. Um, can we get access to this deck? I will try and share some of it. Um, and then Christy, I'll let you share one more thing. I'll find the next question for you. But let's say we want to go and build an AI incentive calculator. Create an incentive calculator for my large research and product organization to help people figure out how much they should pay for interviews, surveys, etc., with different audiences. Keep in mind, we can't incentivize government employees. And so, look, there's a ton of these sort of calculators out there. You can go and see them on every research tools website has got something like this. And the cool thing about this is you can see it sort of thinking through, right? It's like, all right, I'm going to create this comprehensive guide. I'm going to do this and that. And now it's actually going and generating the code for it and deciding how to go and make these decisions. There's tons of sources of this information out there into the wild. And the great thing is you can customize it. So your organization might have really particular ways you want to do things. You might like government employees, or hey, if they're a student, we only pay this much, or we pay doctors this much and nurses this much. For better or worse, there are organizations that operate like that. And so that was a pretty simple prompt. It took 5 seconds for it to think about it, and now it's going and generating this. And while it is doing that, I'll show you one that I prepared earlier, where look, this isn't perfect, but as an AI generated thing, this took me maybe 10 minutes worth of prompting, maybe that, and then maybe 10 minutes worth of generation. So I can go and select the method, let's say user interviews, where I want to have a medium risk, or maybe it's a high risk project. I need statistical significance. It's an hour-long session, and my audience is professionals. Um, uh, you could quibble with this amount. Maybe you would go and adjust it based on what you want to do, and it's very easy for me to do that. And I could also say extra specialized skills. Great, it's going to bump that up. Now, what it's also giving me some references and methodology. So, how did it determine sample size and incentive amounts and research of method best practices to help us decide which methodology is there? So there is some citations here. And now I could go and add a backend to it, so I can go and edit it based on how I wanted to, or I could go and chat to it to go and figure out an answer. But yeah, this is the first version that this has gone and produced in that quick prompt. Again, I can select my audience and my And let's say it's hours, let's say one. And let's talk to 10 participants. And cool, this is actually saying a much greater amount. It's up to you and your organization. Again, this is your role as the orchestrator and as the human in the loop to come back and guide it to what makes the most sense here. And I'll pause there. We've got a minute to go. Happy to go over if that helps. Sorry if we didn't get to everything.
I know, but there's so many great questions. I know we didn't get a chance to address all of them, but thank you, Ned. So insightful and really cool to see the product in action. Um, and for those still on the call, please take a minute to share your feedback of today's event. We do read these comments, so the link should be in the chat, the evaluation form.
And I would love to hear any questions, feedback, follow up. You want to see something, email me at ned@greatquestion.co. I also really want to hear what you think I maybe got wrong. Like, what am I talking about? You're like, that is just off base. Because again, open-minded, I want to be convinced that I'm, I don't, convince me, but like, I want to hear where maybe I've not quite got it right. So always learning. Thanks everyone.